Hello, everybody. We'll get started in a moment. Just wait a minute for allow everybody to join. All right, so it's just ticked over at 12:01, so we'll get started. I'd like to wish everybody a good afternoon and welcome to the Florey's Virtual Open Day. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which today's event is taking place, the land of the Wurundjeri people, and pay respect to their elders and families. My name's Associate Professor David Abbott, and I'm a researcher in the Neuroimaging and Epilepsy group at the Florey, and I'm also chair of the Florey's Graduate Research Committee. And so in these roles, I have the unique pleasure of watching many graduate students successfully start their research career at the Florey. And it's really one of the best parts of my job, I think, is to welcome new students and see them progress. So it's my absolute pleasure today to welcome you to our virtual Student Open Day. It's a pity, of course, that due to COVID, we can't be meeting in person, but we've still got a packed event for you today in a virtual setting. You'll be hearing from the director of the Florey, from world-class researchers, and you'll have the chance to meet some of our students and hear about life as a Florey student. So to start off today's event, I'd like to introduce the director of the Florey and head of the Florey department at the University of Melbourne, Professor Steve Petrou. Professor Petrou is a globally recognised leader in the field of ion channel neuropathies. He has a particular focus on genetic epilepsies affecting infants and young children. And his research, like much of that at the Florey, is interdisciplinary. He has a national and international collaborations with leading clinicians and scientists, through which he's also co-founded 2 biotech companies to commercially develop new treatments for patients with epilepsy and related disorders. So it's my pleasure to welcome Steve to the podium today, and over to you, Steve.
Thanks, David. So in addition to the acknowledgement of the traditional owners, I'd also want to acknowledge the people that are living with the neurological conditions, the Florey researchers, and recognise that our mission to solve the great brain and mind challenges of our era remains urgent and important. So sadly, because of the COVID situation we're all experiencing, we can't meet face-to-face today, but the COVID situation also gives us an opportunity to reflect on something that's really important to all of us as scientists. What we are seeing is when we look at the news and the social media, we're seeing the real impact that science can have on people. And now more than ever, governments, societies, everyone is recognizing the need for science, for clinicians, for industry, and for all of us to work together to solve the challenges that face us. We've heard about the difficulties, even once the vaccines were made, that was just a small part of what needed to happen in order to get these vaccines out to the public, in order to monitor them, in order to know how to administer them safely, all these things. So we need huge amounts of collaboration, all driven by years and years of brilliant science. So it's a great time to be thinking about a scientific career. And when we think about the important mission of our institute, we know that COVID not only is a respiratory virus that causes terrible respiratory problems with people, but there's also emerging evidence that COVID affects the brain, so-called long COVID. And we think about the important things that institutes like ours can do to understand that and to think in the long term about how we're going to tackle the emerging issues. It's really important to that when thinking about your careers, that you think about the importance of what you're going to do in the next part of your career. So I think it's with great optimism, enthusiasm, that I welcome all the prospective students and our next generation of scientists to Florey Open Day. As many of you probably know already, we are one of the largest brain research organizations in the Southern Hemisphere, and we do have an international reputation for world-class research and translational outcomes. As many research organizations and brain research organizations do brilliant brain research at the basic level, and the Florey does that, but we are also very much focused on translating those findings into better outcomes for patients and society. Our researchers at large study a very broad range of neurological and mental health disorders. We have a talented team of support staff who aim to make the Florey a place that empowers people, conducts innovative and exciting research, and is really a hub for enriching the partnerships that are needed to drive impact. As David said, myself, as well as being the director, I'm a very dedicated researcher in the area of ion channel disorders, with a particular focus on rare epileptic encephalopathies. And these are neurogenetic changes that result in very severe childhood disease. It's been a privilege in my career to be able to understand these disorders and to think now of ways that we can develop treatments. With this knowledge and these years and years of research in hand, we actually can turn our attention now towards developing therapies for these kids. And that's something that has given me a lot of enormous personal satisfaction. And I'm sure, many of you who are attending today would be thinking about that aspect to a science career. You'll hear later today from our leaders at the Florey. There's real drive, amongst all of us to really understand the mysteries of our brains and minds, and to really translate those into huge positive impacts for our community. To give you a view of what's happening at the Florey, a bit of a snapshot. We are quite diverse in the areas that we study. There's about 500 staff, 250 postgraduate students working across our campuses in Parkville and Heidelberg. We have state-of-the-art facilities that will allow us to conduct multidisciplinary research and very strong clinical links across the road here in Parkville at Royal Melbourne Hospital, but also at our Austin Hospital campus, very close ties with the Austin Hospital. And we think that is a really important part, and a very unique aspect that we bring to the Institute. We have expertise in operating around 18 different disease areas that affect brain and mind, and about 200 active projects at this time, as well as clinical trials. And why is that important? Well, what we study impacts about 5 million Australians. And that's just enormous to think that the things that we're working on as an organization touches so many lives across Australia. And these people are affected directly by at least one of the conditions that we research. We have 3 major divisions, and we're interested really in early or developing brain. We're interested in the productive brain, and we're interested in the aging brain. It really reflects the life cycle when we're born, and the importance when you are born of preventative medicine, of understanding how healthy starts to life. That's where a lot of neurogenetic disorders first emerge in the young kids. And then there's disorders and conditions that affect us as adults, and how do we maintain healthy brains, and how do we cope when we do have a disorder. And then as we age, we all know about dementias and other conditions that affect aging. What can we do as an organization to better understand that, better serve the needs of the community and the people that are suffering from disorders associated with the aging brain. We are driven, and in order to do that, we really have sort of created 3 pillars that provide the foundation for how we think as an organization. And clearly, we want to be an innovator in brain research. And as we said there, we want to enable ingenuity and visionary thinking to reveal inner workings of the brain and mind. So that means we need to be a place where people can come and be as good as they can be. We have the resources, we have the teams, we have the ability for people to fully engage and be the best researchers they possibly could be. We also want to be a hub for enriching partnerships. You can't You can't do these things on your own. You need to do scientific collaborations. You need to make partnerships with funding and philanthropy organizations. You need to make partnerships with patient communities. You need to make partnerships with government and other organizations, our university partners, our hospital partners. We need to be able to bring all those together in order to really maximize the impact that our research has on people. And in talking about people, we also need to be very, very cautious and very focused on it being a place where people are empowered as individuals. And that means we have to commit to equality, to diversity, to respect and integrity. All these things in mind, you do get the best out of people. You get the best out of an organization if you have these principles as cornerstones of your culture and the way that you operate. Of course, you know, the challenges of the last 18 months have been thrust upon us by COVID. We've been fortunate as a permitted workplace to remain opened. So we've been open for business. We've of course had to take measures to protect people that are that are coming into the institute, but our labs, our support staff have been coming in to ensure that the facilities are running and the institute is maintaining as much productivity as it can in these trying times. As one example of that, last year alone, we made headlines in 41 different countries. And I'll give a few examples of stories from the year, just to give you a feeling for the types of things we do here. You know, and we've also had researchers that have directly turned their attention to how their expertise can deal with the health challenges brought to us by COVID. Two of these researchers, Professor Kevin Barnum and his PhD student, Lee Beecham, were the first in the world to warn of the possible neurological consequences of COVID in their consideration of their work in the Parkinson's space. Chris Reed, you can see at the bottom, with his researcher, early research career researcher, Dr. Ming So, they identified potential biomarkers to predict a very severe consequence of having epilepsy is this thing called sudden unexpected death, where people with epilepsy just, you know, die overnight without any really known reason why that happens. And that affects a lot of people with epilepsy, and they've developed and identified an important biomarker that might help us understand who's at risk. And then finally, new research led by Professor Julie Bernhardt, shown on the top right there, and her PhD student, Jessica Keating, is really helping us to shape better care for young stroke survivors. And that's something we don't necessarily think about, but stroke isn't only a disorder of the elderly, it does affect young people. They've recruited over 170 participants in Australia, Europe, and North America, and their work is really leading to development of more inclusive methods of stroke treatment. What's good for an older person isn't necessarily good for a young stroke survivor, and we need to understand that and provide the best care possible. That's just 3 examples of the types of research we do at the Florey. And if any of that sounds interesting to you, please stay on for our panel session. You'll meet some of our current research students involved in a much broader range of projects that span a much broader region than this. There's Alzheimer's and dementias, Parkinson's disease, basic neurophysiology of neural integration in brain function. So there's many other areas that you can get exposed to by staying on for the panel. You'll hear about work from addiction, etc. So I really ask you to avail yourself of that opportunity at the end of this session. Please do visit our website. There's lots of additional information there. And there'll be you'll see what's up to date in the research. Individual groups will showcase their research and projects that are available. And we also have social media and our Brain Matters magazine that's available online. So as a student, what can you expect? Well, you can expect high quality internationally recognized supervisors who are sort of world leaders, a highly supportive training environment with state-of-the-art facilities and equipment. And this really extends beyond your individual project and laboratory you might find yourself in, but there's an active and connected student group who you'll hear from later, a professional development beyond your lab, including an internal internship program, offering short placements for students in communication, business development, and other career-enhancing areas throughout the institute, and a network of peers. If any of that sounds appealing, as I said, and you're interested in studying, I encourage you to reach out to potential supervisors, discuss what your individual aims are, and I'm sure you will find a very receptive audience and a willingness where we can, to be flexible in the research design and really make sure you're meeting your own career objectives. If you do choose to join us, you'll be part of an institute that prides itself on innovation, visionary thinking, and research excellence. And as I said, we like to unite people, ideas, and organizations to solve important brain problems. And we'll do what we can to make you be the best researcher you can be. So hope to see you one day soon as one of our students, and I wish you all the best for your future endeavors. Thanks very much, David.
Thanks, Steve, for that great overview. So now we're going to hear from the heads of our key divisions, and it's my pleasure first to introduce you to the head of the Developing Brain Division, Professor Anne-Louise Ponsonby. Anne-Louise is an epidemiologist and public health physician. She has extensive experience in the design, conduct, and analysis of population-based studies, and then public health translation. So over to you, Anne-Louise.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Yes, in our division, the Developing Brain Division, we work across three domains. The first is neurodevelopment, looking at how the normal brain develops up to age 18, from conception to 18. We also look at brain repair, such as people getting over, say, MS relapses and so on. And we look also at neuroregeneration, and that encompasses things like stem cell development that we hope one day could substitute in for damaged neurons. So we have 4 themes within the developing brain, which are listed there. And each of those themes has elements that come towards, that are helping us move towards personalized medicine. So we realize that neuroimaging, genetics, and biomarkers in the periphery for the brain are very important as we move towards really high-level treatment and prevention. And these 4 themes are moving in that way. To give you an example of some of our projects, these are some of the many that are listed in detail on the student website, but there's things like projects on neuroimaging with functional MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, to look at functional active patterns in real time in the brain. There's work to help people with Parkinson's with stem cells that might produce dopamine to help remedy some of the dopamine deficits in certain parts of the brain. There's studies looking at the genetics that might underlie sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. There's very intricate studies at the neuron function level, looking at how memory is actually built up in the cortex, looking at neurochemistry and electrophysiology in that domain. And lastly, there's work on environment, particularly early life environment, and how that might influence in the developing brain and behaviour, especially in relation to plastics. And we have some lab models where we can then look at the downstream consequences of plastic consumption while the baby's forming. So that just gives you some ideas of our projects, but there's many excellent academics within our division and within Florey generally, and I think you'll find more when you go to the student projects. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Anne-Louise. So next we'll hear from the head of the Productive Brain Division, Professor Andy Lawrence. Andy also runs the Addiction Neuroscience Laboratory at the Florey. Over to you, Andy.
Thanks, David, and thanks, Anne-Louise, as well. Yeah, as David said, I'm the division head of the Productive Brain Division, and if we can move to the next slide, please. We can see the three themes within this division are mental health, and within the mental health theme, we have expertise and active projects looking at schizophrenia and mood disorders, looking at cognition, looking at drug and alcohol abuse, and eating disorders. And in regards to Adam's question that he posted, I'm actually on the advisory board of the Psyche Institute, which is the institute that's just been established for psychedelic research in Melbourne. And we have a number of investigators that are actively planning psychedelic-based projects. Within the neurotherapeutics division, or theme, should I say, the expertise and active programs there involve target-based drug design, particularly around GPOD-coupled receptors or GPCRs, and also looking into sleep disorders. Sleep is a major, really unforgiven or unknown aspect of many different disorders, and people often don't consider that, and it's a critical part of a number of problems. And finally, in systems neuroscience, there's active research programs looking at the gut-brain axis, looking at various aspects of autonomic neuroscience, and also how the brain regulates fluid intake, which again is often overlooked but very important. And if we move on to the next slide, I can give you 3 examples of projects there. As Anne-Louise said, for the other division, there are many projects online. So these are just some examples, but please follow the links that are posted and you can see the whole range of projects. But here's 3 various ones. For example, Lee Walker in my group has a project understanding sex differences that drive anxiety and alcohol use, which is very important. Jess Nithyanantharaja in the Synapse Biology and Cognition Laboratory has a project looking at the synaptic basis of disruptive behaviour and cognition with the aim to develop better treatments for mental illness. And Dr. Ben Gu in the Innate Phagocytosis Laboratory has a project looking at how the brain removes excess neurons during development and aging. Again, something that's critically important. That's just a snapshot of our division and what's happening within those themes. But again, as I said before, please look at the links and please find the whole raft of projects that are available. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Andy. So now we'll hear from the head of the Aging Brain Division, Professor Ashley Bush. Ashley is also the director of the Melbourne Dementia Research Centre and head of the Oxidation Biology Unit at the Florey. Over to you, Ashley.
Thank you, David, and welcome everyone. We all want to grow to be old, but the problem is that biology hasn't about aging is a major risk factor for a variety of rather nasty diseases, which are all very difficult to treat. Our division is organized into 3 themes, which are grouped around interest in these disorders. And that includes the neurovascular theme, which focuses mainly on stroke, which is a major cause of death and morbidity in aging. Then there is the neurodegeneration for cognition theme, which focuses on the primary dementias, mainly Alzheimer's disease, but there are a variety of other dementias, but Alzheimer's disease is the biggest one of those. And then there is the neurodegeneration movement theme, which focuses on the movement disorders which become very common with age, and they include Parkinson's disease and motor neuron disease. Motor neuron disease is a disease that affects younger people in the sense that it can occur in mid-adulthood, but very rarely occurs in childhood. So it's grouped into this thematic group. And all of these themes capitalize on a variety of technologies that are available in the Florey, including advanced imaging, analysis of post-mortem human brain tissue, animal technology, as well as cell culture, protein studies. And here I've got an example of a variety of projects which are currently on offer as an illustration. The first one is from Brad Turner's group, to study the impact of autophagic flux. And this is focusing on one of the machineries that goes wrong in motor neuron disease and understanding how the cell actually degrades its own internal constituents in order to survive and how this goes wrong in that disorder. Then we have a very interesting project on using DNA technology with antisense oligonucleotides to downregulate the expression of a protein which is implicated in Parkinson's disease. We also have a project from Kevin Barnum's group about potential pollutants, microplastics, which are in the environment and how they may accumulate within the brain and impact upon brain health. And then Gavin McCall's group studies one of the canonical models for aging, which is the worm, the Caenorhabditis elegans. And he has a very interesting project which extends the lifespan of this simple organism by modulating the levels of iron within its body. And finally, in my group, in collaboration with Scott Ayton, we study what actually causes the neurons to die in Alzheimer's disease. And we focus on a variety of important neurochemical events using post-mortem human brain tissue, as well as animal models, cell culture, and basic protein biology. Now, in general, of course, there are many more projects which are available within the division. There's many more which can be contemplated, and I encourage you to actually contact senior researchers such as myself during your development stage to discuss the possibilities, and we can craft a project which meets your interest and your goals. So thank you for that.
Thanks very much, Ashley. So graduate research is an experience that can be very much enriched by the peer network that you establish. And so with that in mind, I'd now like to introduce you to Brandon Richards, who's president of the Students of Florey Institute group and a current master's student at the Florey.
Thanks, David. As David said, I am the president of the SOPHI committee, and the committee are the representatives for all the students at the Florey Institute. So what do we actually do for the students? We provide opportunities for Florey students to be a part of the student community and enrich their experience through educational and professional development. So an advantage of being a Florey student means you get this unique opportunity to attend a variety of academic, social, and wellbeing events throughout the year. So in terms of academic events, we help organize the annual PhD Student Symposium, where every Florey student gets an opportunity to present their research to their peers and they gain valuable feedback from postdoctoral researchers. We also hold weekly Shut Up and Write sessions for our students, and this basically helps them stay focused when it comes to thesis submission time, which is currently right now. We also hold weekly student pizza talks in a comfortable environment. So it helps students practice their final presentations and present any interesting data that they may have to their peers. And of course, we offer free pizza. Finally, we offer other academic events like student panel discussions throughout the year. This one that was held last year was students from various stages of their candidature giving advice to other students, and that proved very helpful for the student cohort. Another event that we're really excited to hold this year, and it's brand new, and hopefully we can continue this in later years, is a Student Publication Awards Night, where we acknowledge the great achievement of our students that contribute to student publications throughout the year. And we have quite a few that contribute, which is amazing. We haven't really had a chance to hold this because of COVID restrictions, but we're hoping we can hold that in person, and we're really excited to deliver on this event. In terms of social events, we hold a variety of these throughout the year to try and hold the student community together. This year we held a table tennis tournament when we could, which was quite fun, and it was nice to interact with everyone in person again. We also held some frequent coffee catch-ups, which proved to be quite a hit and really reinforced the student community throughout the year. But in these times, we've had to adapt and transfer our events online. So we've held an online games night, which has attracted quite a few students to interact while they're stuck at home, writing their theses and doing their analyses. But also at the start of the year, we hold a welcome barbecue for all the new students that attend, and we were lucky enough to be able to hold this in person at the start of the year, which is a great opportunity for new students to mingle amongst other new students and also meet more experienced students that can give them advice on how to deal with life at the Florey. Other than these events, we hold other well-being type events throughout the year. One of them was a creation of a soccer team that compete against other institutes around the Parkville precinct. Another one is a crafternoon session where we offer students to meet up in our tea room, and we get to bring whatever arts and crafts we want to do and have a nice socialize. And also we launched a PhD and postdoc mentoring program where PhD students are matched up, or PhD masters honors students are matched up with someone of more experience, and then they can create a mentor-mentee relationship. And I know several students have found this very beneficial for their careers. In terms of, so if that sounds good to you and you're looking at being a prospective student, we have some advice from current students for those who are looking to join. It's really important to talk to multiple supervisors to get an idea of the different projects that are around the Florey. There's really quite a lot being offered. Asked to talk with current students and staff and prospective groups. I like to think that we're all pretty friendly and open and love talking about our research. Think about what techniques you might want to learn. The Florey offers quite a lot of different laboratories that work with different types of models. So we work with cells, animals, and some people also work in human studies. So those are things to think of when you're looking at getting a place at the Florey as a student. And once you're here, it's also important to remember that when you're doing a research degree, it's way more about your thesis. Don't forget about the rest of the things that we have on offer. Don't forget to make friends and make those scientific networks and develop your transferable skills that will help you with your professional development. I hope that sounds enticing to Florey students. Thanks for listening.
Thanks very much, Brandon. That's great advice. So I'd like to now take a moment just to talk about how to apply and reiterate a couple of things that has been said already. Check the website. That's really the first port of call. All our projects, well, not all of them actually, but a much larger selection than we've shown here of projects listed on the website. If you see a project that's of interest or in an area that's of interest, contact the supervisor. And there is some flexibility in the projects that are listed, and there are other ones that may not be listed, that depending on your particular background, if you have a chat with a prospective supervisor in an area of interest, may be able to tailor a project for you. And once both you and the supervisor have agreed to a project, you then submit the documentation to the university. For honours and master's students, your prospective supervisor will be able to advise you on which department through which you should apply, because the Florey itself doesn't directly enrol honours and master's students. For PhD students, we do directly enrol students through the Florey Department of Neuroscience and Mental Health at the University of Melbourne. So, for more information on becoming a student, if you've got questions, we have a fantastic graduate research administrator, Jackie Monroe Smith, and I might ask Jackie just to turn her video on and wave to you now. Jackie is very happy to assist prospective students and also help in the onboarding process. So thank you very much for all your hard work and continuing work in that role, Jackie.
Thank you.
And we also have an academic coordinator at the Florey for the Master of Biomedical Science. So even though this is a coursework degree in which you enroll in another department, the research component of that coursework can be conducted at the Florey. And Sarah Gordon, if I can ask you to switch on your video, Sarah Gordon is our academic coordinator for that master's program. And she can help you in terms of pointing in the right direction for enrolling and mentoring you when you come on board. So thanks, Sarah. So we've now got a slide here that just shows a snapshot of the website. So the link is shown at the top there, but if you want to navigate from the home page, you just click on the Science and Research drop down, and then there's a Research Projects item listed there. You click on that and you'll end up at this page. And I just wanted to put this up to highlight that at the top of the page here, you can, or at least at the bottom of this slide, but it's really the top of the web page, there's a filter section. So there's a list of topics that you can select there. If you are aware of a particular supervisor you want to contact already, you can also filter by that. But I'd advise, if you don't quite know where to start, just have a look at the topics, pick some that are of interest, click on the Accepting Students flag there to begin with, and these are projects that supervisors have put up explicitly looking for students in that area. Click Go and you'll get a list of projects that you can browse. That's the best way to really find out what we're doing at the Florey and see what might interest you. And if you do see a project that is of interest, each project has the supervisor listed. You can click on that to get to their homepage and their contact details. Just send them an email. Finally, just the next slide, we do have a vibrant social media presence, so you can keep up to date with the latest research and events that are happening at the Florey via your favourite channel there. You're welcome to stay in touch in that way as well. So that concludes the formal sort of information session for today's event, but now we're going to change tack a little and meet some of our current students and hear about their perspectives on their honours, masters and PhD degrees. So I'd like to now welcome our panel. If you can all turn on your videos. Let me switch to gallery so I can see you all. So we have Katie Lewis, an honours student, Raul Das, a master's student, Kate Huckstep, early PhD, and Lauren Bleakley, who's in her final year of the PhD, writing up at the moment. So what I might do is kick things off, and I should invite the audience to feel free to drop questions into the Q&A or the chat. But I'll start off, if I can, by just going around the room, if you like, and asking each of our panelists to just briefly describe their current position and what their project is about. So perhaps, oops, I've just lost my screen here. Perhaps if we could start with Katie.
Hi. I am Katie. I'm currently an honours student. I did my Bachelor in Science at Uni Melb, and I'm currently looking at the role of oligodendrocytes in motor neuron disease in the Turner lab at the Florey.
Thanks, Katie. And Raul?
Hi, yeah, my name's Raul. I'm a master's student. I did my undergraduate in psychology at La Trobe University. And I'm looking at stem cell transplantations for motor neuron disease in the lab.
Thanks. And Kate?
Yeah, hi. So I'm Kate. I've just started, I'm about 4 months into my PhD, but I also did my master's at the Florey in the same lab I'm in now, which is the addiction lab with Andy Lawrence, who you heard from before. And my research is looking at alcohol use disorder and using animal models to try and figure out the, biological underpinnings of behaviors like relapse or binge drinking, etc. That's me.
Terrific. And Lauren?
Hi everyone, my name's Lauren. I'm a final year PhD student in the epilepsy group. I'm writing up my PhD thesis as we speak. And I also did my honours at the Florey in the same lab I'm in now. And my work has been looking at a particular genetic mutation that causes a severe form of epilepsy. And my project's focusing on how this mutation causes epilepsy and what are the best ways of treating it.
Thanks, Lauren. And maybe you could continue on and describe why you chose the Florey as your place to pursue graduate research.
Absolutely. I've been fascinated by the brain ever since I thought that I wanted to study science, ever since high school. And so I studied, when I was in undergrad, I did my studies were focusing on psychology and neuroscience. And it seemed, to use a bad pun, a bit of a no-brainer to look at the biggest brain research institute in Australia if I wanted to continue studies in brain research.
Terrific. And Kate, how about you?
Yeah, similar. So I was actually interstate when I was doing my undergrad and looking at where to go next for, honors or masters, eventually hoping to do a PhD. And I looked at a few of the neuroscience research institutes over at WA. But I mean, I love Melbourne. My heart's in Melbourne. I'd lived here before and I knew I kind of wanted to come back. And the Florey was a place that, much like Lauren said, biggest brain research institute in Australia. Like I interviewed and sort of got in here, and talking to even some of the professors over in Western Australia, they were like, if you don't mind moving, like it's a worthwhile, like this is a silly opportunity to pass up. You should definitely take this. And I am so glad that I did. Like I love it here.
Terrific. And Raoul?
Yeah, so I'm pretty much the same boat as Lauren. I did my undergrad in psychology and neuroscience, and then knew I wanted to continue in the neuroscience field in my postgraduate. And I mean, the Florey is the foremost neuroscience institute, so it was no brainer again to apply and try and do my research here. Yeah.
Fantastic. And Katie, how did you choose the Florey?
Yeah, so again, similar boat to Lauren, BCE psychology really got me going on all that brain stuff. And then, yeah, like I said, I did my undergrad at Uni Melbourne, just walking past the Florey on a day-to-day basis to get to the tram stop. It just sort of encapsulates you. And I think it's probably different for those who've had to do their last couple of years online, because you obviously can't walk past, but it really is just like a beautiful building in a beautiful campus. And like, why would you want to go anywhere else? I've just done 3 years at going to Uni Melbourne every day. It's basically the same thing. Why change my routine?
All right. So, I mean, honours is a 1-year program, master's 18 months to 2 years, and a PhD is typically 3 to 3.5 years. So I'd like to get an idea from you of the expectations that your supervisors placed on you around the workload in your degree and the kind of constraints around the project work. And so perhaps, Katie, if you want to kick off from the honours point of view.
Yeah, sure. So yes, it is called an honours year, but realistically it's more like an honours 7 to 8 months. And if you've ever done any sort of research subject in your undergrad, you will know that that is not a lot of time. So I'm not gonna lie to you, it is hard, it is stressful, there's a lot that you need to get done within that 7 to 8 months, but it is just so rewarding. And in terms of expectations from your supervisors, the reality is that they know this is probably one of your first experiences doing research. They're not, well, hopefully they're not going to be too hard on you if you make mistakes, because in reality, your honours year is a learning year. It's all about just getting into the lab, figuring out what's going on, producing something that you can be proud of, and then hopefully incentivizing you to maybe come back again next year for a master's or a PhD. But just the key thing to know is that it's just a learning experience. Don't be too hard on yourself if you don't get things right the first time, because it's just, and your supervisors will understand that you are learning. But it's great. Doing honours is great.
Terrific. And Raoul, the masters.
Yeah, so much in the same way that honours is a 1 year, 8 months program, and you're spending most of it learning. Masters is a 2-year program, so it's basically double your honours. But the majority of my first year was learning techniques, learning research, the basics of it. I never had any experience before doing my masters, so it was quite a learning experience. But I mean, again, your supervisors do know that, and hopefully able to help you with that. But in terms of the research and what we do, it depends, I guess, on the projects. Some projects might go a lot longer or have a lot more stuff to do compared to others. My one, I only had one project, but it was quite a large one. We only just finished doing a lot of our experiments in August this year. So it really depends on the project you're in, on how much work you'll have. Because I know a few friends at the Florey who are doing multiple projects in their masters. So it varies depending on lab and projects. So, yeah.
The projects are typically fairly well prescribed from the start by the supervisor for both the honours and the master's project. The PhD is a little more flexible. There's more autonomy. So perhaps, Kate, if I can ask you first, walking into the PhD, what are the expectations and workload?
Yeah, well, I mean, because I did masters as well, so like similar to what's been said, masters is like and honors is like that full-time job, but it's very much, you're very much more guided, and you're very much more expected to not know what you're doing, and that's totally fine. PhD, I found there's kind of been this shift in attitude, even though I'm in the same lab and following similar kind of project lines. It's much more like, okay, but what do you want to do? Like, you've got these answers, like, where do you want to go next? And that, so you've got the same workload, but you've got that chance to kind of feel like you've got control of the project and like what you want to explore, which I'm finding very exciting, but also terrifying, but terrifying in the best way. So we'll see how that all unfolds.
Well, perhaps Lauren, were you terrified, and did it unfold well?
It has unfolded very well for me. I've been very fortunate, but it is a lot to start off with, absolutely. I think the biggest thing about a PhD is that the aim of the whole program over 3 to 3.5 or maybe a little bit more years is to train you to be an independent scientist by the end of it. So as Kate said, there's a lot more of your own independent thought that goes into the research and your planning. But I've found, at least with my project, that the expectations built up over the course of the PhD. So for example, in my first year, I was still being, quite heavily trained by other people in my lab. And then by the end of my PhD, I'd been helping to train the next generation of honours students in some of my techniques. Or for example, in the first year of my PhD, I might have started giving talks at little lab meetings in our group. And then by the end of my second year and into my third year, I was giving talks at conferences. So while the expectations are there, they do build up gradually as you get more experience. So I wouldn't be too terrified going in.
Terrific. So I'm just looking through the chat, and there's been a question there about how the workload might have changed with travel restrictions and COVID. And so perhaps if I could ask how it's impacted you, and how did the Florey sort of support your path given
Absolutely.
Given
Look, to be honest with you, I'm probably not the best person to speak to this, because I've been very lucky in that both of Melbourne's big lockdowns, the one at the end of last year and then this current one, I've mostly been writing up. Last year I was writing a big paper, which we got published earlier this year, and this year I've been writing my thesis. So perhaps one of the other students can speak more to how it's interrupted with like actual lab work.
Kate, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was in a similar situation with last year's lockdown. I was writing my master's thesis, and so the workload was the same, but I'm not someone who works well from home, and my home environment is not exactly ideal for that. And so I just want to, like, if you find yourself in that situation, I found that the Florey, or my supervisors in particular, were like very supportive and understanding of the fact that, the quality of work, the quality of drafts that I was handing them was not the sort of quality that they knew I was capable of. And they would like, everyone was really understanding of that. And I found that really good, because I know that's one of the hardest things, I think, is trying not to beat yourself up for, we're in a pandemic. It's going to affect the quality of your work. And I think the Florey has been understanding of that. This year it's been a bit different, because I have been doing lab work, and because we are a medical research institute, you can get a permit to come in if you have essential experiments. So I've been able to come in and still do some of the experiments that I was doing, and I'm grateful for that because it's been a reason to leave the house during lockdown. But yeah, so it is challenging at the moment because you're trying to sometimes work from home, but you do get that opportunity to work in the lab. And I think, you know, the Florey's been fantastic throughout. Like, you know, this last week I was at an exposure site, and so I've actually been in isolation, and the Florey's been very supportive through that as well. Like my supervisors in particular, but also just getting a call from Florey HR, just being like, just making sure you're okay kind of thing, like, which I think is fantastic. So yeah.
And Katie, so it affected your honours?
Yeah, so I kind of already half answered this in the chat, but yeah, so just to sort of re-emphasize, for honours specifically, I can't speak to the other masters and PhD, but we actually got sent out a document for like that outlined how we would be marked, and they have like, and so this is more UniMelb than Florey, but UniMelb has highlighted that they will be not marking harshly on students who haven't produced a large quantity of results. It's more about the quality of your writing, which I think is incredibly important given, as Kate just said, it can be quite hard to, or sometimes it can be difficult to justify going in if you don't have essential experiments. But for me personally, I haven't had too much trouble. The only trouble I've had going in is when I've personally been told that I'm a tier 2 or something. So that's like, you know, that's a me problem. That's not a Florey problem. So in terms of getting a permit, there was no troubles getting in, you know, getting access. It shouldn't really be an issue. But I think, as Kate said as well, that the supervisors are understanding that the quality of the work produced at home might not be the same. But in terms of access in the lab, I don't think you'll have too much difficulty in completing experiments, to be perfectly honest.
Great. Raul, do you have anything to add to that? Did you?
Yeah, so quite in the same boat as Katie. I wasn't too affected by last year's lockdown. Fortunately, when the lockdowns came, I was given a permit almost immediately. I had live cells and in vivo work to come in to do. So it was, for me personally, that was good. But the work did change a bit. I mean, I missed out on quite a bit of training that I wish I did, and the techniques I haven't learned because of that I would normally have learned, which is unfortunate. But UniMelb and Florey have been really supportive throughout the whole process. I mean, part of my thesis, they've suggested, they've told us to add in a COVID statement to our thesis, so readers and the markers know just how much we were affected by it and take that into account. So they've been really supportive and really transparent and helpful throughout the whole process. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Yeah. All right, so I might ask you, Raul, to continue on and tell us how you decided on the particular project and the lab that you joined, and perhaps even, you know, how do you approach the supervisor, and what things should you prepare for when you're approaching a prospective supervisor?
Yep. I mean, I've always been interested in neurodegenerative diseases, and stem cell therapy has always been really interesting. I mean, I didn't know much about it before, besides reading stuff in the media and, you know, different papers, but like it's always been something I'm really interested in. So I went onto the Florey website and I looked through all the projects, and I saw this one about stem cell therapy from a neuron pop out in the Thompson lab, and I'd asked a few of my professors back at La Trobe if they knew about the Thompson lab, they knew about the people working at Florey, and they told me there was an excellent lab and an excellent institute to apply to. So it was quite easy for me to choose this lab. And in terms of like talking to and approaching my supervisor, it was as simple as just sending an email. I mean, all the supervisor details are on the website, and just send a little email saying you're interested, and sort of that's how we just started from there.
Does anyone else want to sort of add to that? I mean, I think that's the sort of exemplary way to do it. Find your interest.
Yeah, I might jump in. If that's all right.
Katie, yes.
When I sort of viewed it a little bit like Tinder. You know, you don't settle for the first match that you make. You sort of keep on swiping and see if there's someone a little bit more, just a bit more right for you. So I think I interviewed via Zoom like 4 or 5 potential supervisors, and they were all absolutely lovely. But it's just really about finding the right fit for you. And you have to remember the supervisor's also trying to find the right fit for them. And they wouldn't have a project on display if they weren't looking for a student. So they need you just as much as you need them. So it's really just about finding someone who they're going to work for you, they're going to meet your needs. And it's not just about you meeting theirs, you know, it's sort of a give and take relationship. You both have to give and you both have to take. It's not one-sided, it's 50-50. So yeah, for me, it was just finding the right fit. I literally just, I don't know if you've received, there should be like a booklet coming out of projects that are in your certain field. I literally just emailed them and said, hey, I'm Katie, I'm doing my undergrad in science and I'm looking for an honours project. Do you want to have a Zoom coffee catch up? Easy as that. Usually, like I said, they're looking for students as well. So they're equally as keen to get you on board and get you on Zoom and find out if you suit them. So yeah, just be honest with yourself. They will absolutely be interested in hearing about you. Just a question, elaborate on the interviewing aspect of the application. It's not an official interview. It's just, for honours at least, it's not an official interview. It's literally just like a get to know you kind of thing. It's very quite casual. It's not anything official. I think the PhD though, that might be an interview if someone wants to speak to that.
I can speak to that, although for me it was a little different because the lab I did my PhD in is the same lab as I did my honours in. So for us, it was pretty straightforward. I had a chat with my supervisor. We'd worked well together during honours. I was keen to do a PhD, and so it was a fairly obvious kind of progression there. But I will also just add in quickly that when I started looking for projects, unlike Raoul, I had no idea what field I wanted to research. I wasn't fixed on doing any one particular field. And some advice that I'd been given, which I think holds true, is that particularly when you're starting off in honours as a very early stage, you want to find somebody that you can work well with, and the supervisor and the supervisor-student relationship is, I think, quite critical when you're learning all of the techniques and just learning how science works. So the advice I was given was to focus a lot on how you get along with the supervisor. And so same as Katie, I spoke to probably 4 different supervisors quite seriously and ended up making a decision more based on whose supervisory style I thought would work best with me, because obviously the Florey's got tons of great supervisors, but they all work slightly differently. And when you're learning, it's important to find someone who works well with how you want to work.
Yeah, I think that is very important, and particularly the longer the degree. So for PhD especially, and if you're doing an honours with a view to entering a PhD, you know, it is 3 years of your life that you're going to be working and collaborating with your supervisor. So it is worth taking the time to get to know them and speak to more than just one, as Katie said.
And also speak to other people in the lab.
Yes.
Brad mentioned earlier, speak to other students if there are other students in the lab, or postdocs, whoever else is around, to get a feel for how the lab operates.
Kate, do you have anything to add to that?
I think it's very good advice to interview lots of different potential supervisors. I didn't really do that. I was very driven by the topic. Like, I was reading through all the potential things and I was very drawn to, you know, addiction. I'd done an assignment, I think, in undergrad, writing a review about something to do with alcohol use disorder. So I'd already kind of read a bit around the subject, and then I ended up like scrolling through topics, and then I recognized a name and I was like, I've read a paper by this lab. And then so I'd read, so, you know, when I emailed Andy initially, I was like, hey, I'm studying my undergrad in science, in neuroscience at UWA, but I'm very interested in coming to the Florey and studying with you. I've read these papers. or I think maybe I just said one paper, and I'd love to do a project that uses similar sort of techniques, because that's what I was drawn to. I was like, that looks really interesting and really fun. And I just happened, like, I mean, I had a Zoom call with Lee and Andy, my two supervisors, and it was I got good vibes. I got a lot of insightful thoughts and information about, doing masters versus honors, like whatever sort of different route I wanted to take. And I think I got lucky that the first people I approached at the Florey were great, and I ended up going with them, and they've been great. And so then I chose to stay on with them for a PhD as well, because they've been great. But yeah, maybe you might not get so lucky. So listen to the others, not me. But it is also valid to be driven. Like, if there's something that you want to study, like, that's what's going to help you at the times when you're like, this sucks. And there are going to be times where you're like, this sucks. Why am I doing this with my life? Why am I, playing with rats at 11 p.m. at night? Like, what am I doing? Being really driven by the area. If there's something that like really lights that fire in you, explore it, read around, tell the people that you've approached that you have read their stuff, because that's going to help them, I think, respect that you're actually serious about doing this, which I think you should be serious about doing it. You should take the initiative to know what you're asking about before you set up these meetings, instead of expecting those supervisors to just fill you in on everything. I don't know. That's what I would add.
So you mentioned the odd late night session in the lab. What is the typical day look like for you, doing your PhD?
I don't think there is a typical day, I think, is the answer to that. I think every day looks different. Like, I might be spending the whole day in a dark room with a microscope. I might be in the lab. I might be doing behavior stuff with the rats or the mice. I might get to do surgery. I might be reading a lot of papers all day. I might be sitting at my computer doing data analysis. I might be doing a bit of all of that in one day. Like, and for me, that is the appeal of science and research and doing these graduate research degrees, because I get bored very, very easily. And if I had to do the same thing every single day for a year, I think I would go crazy. And I love that there isn't a typical day, and that, some days might be 9 to 5. Well, not at the moment when we can't come in, but previously, like, I might come in 9 to 5 and sit at my desk all day. That might happen. But other days I might come in at 4 p.m. and stay till 8 p.m. And some days I might, be even longer than that. It's really varied, and I value that. That won't work for everyone, but for me, that's a big draw.
And Lauren, how did you find that?
Basically copy and paste everything that Kate just said. Very similar. I think one of the best things I've found with doing a PhD, at least for my project in my lab, is that my time was pretty much my own. I knew what I was trying to achieve. I knew what the experimental aims were, but it was left up to me to plan the experiments, to book all of the equipment, to make sure that we had all the consumables, that, like, things like the drugs that I wanted to test that we needed. And then it was up to me to run the experiments when it would fit in with my timing, which once again for me worked really well. It did mean that occasionally, particularly for some experiments, you just know that you have long days sometimes. So there's a certain type of experiment that I do that is pretty much a 10-hour day, sometimes 11-hour day minimum, no matter which way you do it, just because it's a couple of hours of preparation in the morning, and then you're gathering data as much as you can in the afternoon. But on the flip side of that, it meant that every Thursday afternoon I could leave a little bit early to go to my hockey training. So, like, it does leave you that kind of flexibility for just general life as well. And I really appreciated that as well.
And Ra, what about the masters?
Kate hit the nail on the head with that. There is no typical day. I think that's just a standard across research, really. It's just you have a project and the set amount of work you need to do, and you sort of just plan it as you see fit. Like, how much work you want to do is up to you. And you do work around, restrictions, obviously, at the moment with COVID and stuff, to work around what we have. But yeah, I mean, for me, every day has been pretty much different. It's either writing, reading, surgeries, tissue culturing, or behavior, or a whole bunch of different things to do. So it's very different. Can't really say there's a typical day of Florey.
And Katie, have you found the honours here?
Yeah, so obviously at the start of honours, like I said, because you're learning so much, you are a little bit more dependent on your supervisor's schedule because you need someone to show you the ropes. But as you become more familiar with the processes and learn the experiments and get better at them, you do gain a sense of independence and just being able to sort of stick to your own schedule. So yeah, there's no such thing. I mean, at the start of honours, we were all told, oh yeah, it's a 9 to 5 kind of thing. But I don't think I've ever been in 9 to 5. For me personally, I work a part-time job, so I work from home. I do morning shifts 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., which sounds horrible, but it's not as bad as it seems. And then I'll go to the lab at 10. There's no set time, as long as you just communicate with your supervisor when you'll be in or when you're available, or no, I can't make it in this day, can we do it this day instead? It's a 24/7 facility, which is one of the things I love about it, about the Florey. You can just go in anytime you want. Obviously with COVID restrictions, that's a little bit limited at the moment, but on a normal day, it's a 24/7 facility. You can go in on the weekends if you can't make it in on the weekdays. It's just, yeah, it's incredibly flexible, and you're just really given the freedom to just do your own autonomous work and not have to worry about any sort of strict schedules or timelines. It's great. It's really, really flexible. And I guess the important thing to remember is you're choosing to be there. You're choosing to undertake an honours or a master's or a PhD. And if you just keep your own goals in mind, it's like, I want to get this experiment done by the end of this week, you're going to get it done. You don't have to set a strict, you don't have to have your supervisor breathing down your neck telling you, oh, do this, do this, do this, because you know why you're there. You're there for yourself and for your own education and experience, and you'll get it done because that's why you're there. So yeah, it's really great.
I might just point out too, for those listening, that we have, I guess, students here who have been involved in lab work, but there's really a broader diversity of work that's possible, including things such as computational modelling, mathematical modelling. I have a student, for example, that's looking at algorithm development for improving methods of imaging the brain with MRIs. So, and in fact, people in those areas have, I guess, even more flexibility in the COVID era because we're not necessarily tied to the laboratory. So we can actually do a lot of our work remotely, logging into compute servers at the institute. And then we've also clinical researchers, so looking at particular patient cohorts in imaging and in rehabilitation and various other fields. So it's really a broad spectrum of potential student projects that have different aspects to them. So again, have a look at the website and you'll find those projects. I'd like to ask the panel now what they think the important keys to success are in their respective degrees. And perhaps I'll start with Lauren, finishing up on the PhD.
Sure. I think the number one thing is what has been mentioned multiple times earlier, particularly by Brandon, which is having good people around you. A PhD is never done alone. And as well as the importance of having a supervisor that you can work well with, having other good people around you in your lab, potentially through the SOFI group or other lab, other like students in your lab. I think having somebody there, for example, I've got a friend in my lab who keeps a block of dark chocolate in her desk drawer, or at least did prior to COVID time, so that if somebody had a day where just all of the experiments went wrong and nothing was working, they were frustrated, it's all right, we have some chocolate, or we'll go and get a coffee together, or we'll go for a walk. And so I think having that support around you is absolutely critical. And I'd also say just having persistence, because not everything's going to go to plan. That's science, but that's also the kind of a bit of the fun is in the challenge, in figuring out why things aren't working. And sometimes if they don't do what you expect, it's actually hinting you towards something that's even more interesting that you then might want to follow kind of down that route. So having persistence, I think, is another critical element for a PhD.
Definitely. Well said. Kate, keys to success.
I think having stuff outside of your PhD or your master's or your honors is something that shouldn't be understated, the importance of. Like, letting yourself get completely consumed by your project is a surefire way to not do particularly well in that project, or to get, you know, burnt out or over it very quickly. Like, I think it's very important, and like especially at the moment when it's so hard, when the only thing we're allowed to leave the house to do is work, is to really make sure you've got hobbies or like a part-time job outside of work with different people that's not related. Like, you just need some other aspect of your life where you can just switch off to your project and your work. And I think that is a very big key to succeeding in the work. So you can come back refreshed, you have time, like you haven't overthought it, you know, you might have new ideas that come to you, etc. And the other big key to success, I think, that took me about 75% of my master's to figure out, is that like, this is the time, especially the earlier degrees, the honors and masters, to figure out what works for you as a worker. Like, some people are morning workers. They get up, they do their writing in the morning, and then they do the whatever. Some people, like me, my most productive writing hours are between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. It's annoying, but like, I figured that out, and now I just embrace it, and, you know, stuff gets done. And the beauty, as we've already said, of like this type of career is that you've got that flexibility. So figure out what works for you, and don't feel ashamed or bad or weird if what works for you isn't what works for someone else, or what you've seen other people do, or what other people have told you will work. Like, find, you know, just embrace your style of productivity. And I think that that's important in succeeding.
Raul, how about you?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, at least for me personally, would be to temper expectations on what you're going to get out of the research. I mean, at least for masters and honors, the majority of the 1 and 2 years that we have is learning. You're not going to really be looking to cure a disease or find something exceptional, but you're learning how to do these things, and things will go wrong. A lot of things will go wrong. I've experienced that firsthand, especially a lot of my project fell apart, but that's science. I mean, if everyone found something, you know, that worked, we wouldn't really have, most of us be out of a job. So things will go wrong, but just don't be disheartened by it. Learn from what went wrong and adapt and overcome, basically. Yeah.
And Katie?
My keys to success would be ask questions, take notes, speak up, and save your data in multiple places. Don't just save it on a hard drive that you might accidentally leave at the lab.
That's a life skill, isn't it, that one?
And also, yeah, like Raul said, don't be so hard on yourself. You know, there have definitely been times like, Raul's heard me complain so many times about like my immunostaining's not working. Like, I think I had to do it about 5 times before it finally worked. And, you know, every single time I would finish, it's a 3-day protocol. So this is 3 days worth of work that just hadn't worked. And, you know, it's easy to get frustrated and say, oh, what did I do wrong? But sometimes you just got to understand science is hard. Science doesn't want you to succeed sometimes. You know, it's just the science gods, they have an alternate plan. You know, just look after yourself and don't take it too hard, don't take it to heart, because yeah, science is difficult and it's not your fault, you're learning. Also, there is a walk-in fridge, or 1 or 2 on pretty much every lab level. They are your friends. if you're finding yourself to be a little bit overwhelmed, go to the walk-in fridge. It just like immediately calms you down. Like, key to success, just walk-in fridge, your best friend. Yeah.
Fantastic. So what are the most valuable things you think you've gained from your degree, Katie?
I don't know if I could even list them. Honestly, honours is very different to undergrad. Undergrad's very much study, 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 do an exam, forget everything. Honours is it's a steep learning curve at first, but you just, I don't know, it's just very, very hands-on, and it's genuinely been one of the best years of my life. I've made some incredible friends. I have met some incredible scientists, and I've learned to be proud of some of the things that I produce, even if it's not expected. I've just had an amazing year so far, and I don't think I could list, I don't know, the list would be endless if I had to say everything that I've gained and learned from this experience. It's just in every aspect of my life, I'm just incredibly happy with what I've experienced this year at the Florey.
That's fantastic. And Raul, do you have any highlights, do you think?
Where to start? I mean, I came into the Masters with no background in research or anything. So everything I've learned in the Masters has just been amazing. The techniques, the skills, the knowledge, and just, the lab experience itself. I mean, I'm very fortunate in my lab that we have a very close-knit group. We, before restrictions and all, we used to do monthly games nights. We'd go out, play golf, mini golf every weekend. Like, it was just such a experience to have. It was, for me, it felt less like a degree and more like just a fun workplace. So yeah, it's just been,
that's good.
I couldn't say exactly what the best experience has, just the entire thing has been amazing.
And Kate, do you have a highlight or two?
I mean, I think the biggest thing that I have gained through Masters and starting the PhD is like just sort of a sense of confidence that I didn't really have before in terms of in myself. I mean, imposter syndrome is still, the biggest thing ever, especially being somewhere like the Florey. You're like, there's no way I'm smart enough to be here. But then like continuously ticking all the boxes I needed to tick with Masters and techniques that the first time I saw them done, I'm like, there's no way that I could possibly learn to do that. And then a couple months later, I'm doing it like it's nothing. And, proving myself, I'm like, the idea of writing a master's thesis was so like, whoa, there's no way. But I wrote one and I wrote it well. And, that's been really cool to like, feel that imposter syndrome sort of melt away a little bit. Being like, no, I'm here and I continue to be here because I got in because I'm good enough, and I'm ticking the boxes because I'm good enough. And, I've just found the whole experience very validating and, helpful like that. I think that's my biggest thing that I've gotten from being here.
Fantastic. And Lauren, how about you?
Similar to Kate in some ways, but kind of a personal sentiment. For me, it's a feeling of satisfaction that the time that I'm putting into my work actually means something, that I'm doing something that is meaningful and that does have the potential to really, change the world, alter people's lives for the better. I've been very, very lucky with my particular project to work very closely with a family who has a young daughter who has the type of epilepsy that I've been researching. And I get a huge amount of inspiration from that family and their quest to do everything they can to help their child. And so on the tough days when the experiments aren't working, I can think back to the reason why I'm doing this is to help these other people. And I can, go home at the end of the day going, it was worth persisting and sticking around in the lab for that extra time and getting that to work, because what we've managed to discover has already helped this child and has the potential to help other children with a similar condition. And so being able to go home from a work day with a sense of satisfaction that what I'm doing actually makes a difference is a huge one for me.
And let me say, that doesn't stop if
No.
you continue in research.
I'm so glad to hear
it.
it.
Doesn't stop. Yeah. So Lauren, what do you want to do post PhD? Your career aspirations from here?
Well, for the short to medium term, I want to stay in research. I love what I do. Everybody who I speak to outside of science thinks that I'm one of those annoying people that can't shut up about their work because they love it. So I'm always talking about science and thinking about science. Not 100% of the time, as Kate said, balance is important, but I do really enjoy what I do. So my immediate plans is, well, submit the PhD thesis in about 2 weeks' time, fingers crossed. And then look to doing a postdoc, hopefully staying at the Florey if I can, because it's such a great place to be. And hopefully next year start to apply for some of my own funding as an early career researcher.
Terrific. Kate, how about you?
Watch this space. We'll see how I feel by the end of the PhD. But at the moment, I'm thinking that I don't actually want to continue in academia and go down that traditional sort of postdoc route. And this is one advantage I found of doing the masters, for example, over the honors, is that I got to do coursework and I got to do some science communication coursework as part of that. And I found that, you know, this passion and ability for communication that I didn't know that I had, and that's been really exciting. And so for me, you know, one of my biggest values is making the really cool science that we do, you know, people deserve to know about it. And we, you know, the public hugely kind of helps fund this sort of stuff. So a very important component of science as an industry is that communication of the science with not necessarily just other scientists, but with the community, with the public, with the lay people. And, you know, so I think once I've done my PhD, I'm going to be going down more that route and trying to, you know, use my, you know, scientific literacy and ability to read those very jargon-laden papers and translate that into sort of a way that is more accessible and digestible. And the Florey, you know, I got to work with the Florey comms team to help compose a Twitter thread when we recently published a paper, and I posted a Twitter thread sort of explaining what we did, and the Florey comms team helped me figure out how to do that and stuff. So, and, you know, as I think it was mentioned earlier in the webinar, that the Florey has internships. I haven't done one yet, but I'm definitely interested in looking at some of those communication internships throughout my PhD and taking my career more that direction. And I think, you know, even though it's not the traditional research postdoc route, the Florey has still been the right place and is the right place for me to be at the moment to get there in my career. So I think that's cool.
Yeah, that's really good. And gee, if the pandemic's taught us one thing, better communication and education of the public around science is very important.
Hasn't it? Yeah, communication is so important right now more than ever. And yeah.
How about you, Raoul? Where are you headed?
Yes. So I'm hoping to continue research in doing a PhD next year at the Florey, however, in a different lab. I'll be jumping ship to Katie's lab. But yeah, I'll be submitting my thesis in a couple of weeks now. Hopefully take a bit of a break, first time in a couple of years, and then jump straight back into research in a PhD.
Okay, great. And Katie?
So in the short term, I definitely want to do a PhD next year with the Florey. I'm hoping to continue on in a similar project to what I'm doing now. But I guess in the long term, and this is a little bit of a silly personal goal, but I don't know how many of you have actually walked past the Florey. There's a wall full of quotes from, I guess, famous neuroscientists, and with a little picture of their names. And I couldn't help but notice that of the 12 quotes, only one of them is a woman. And so it's sort of been one of my sort of pipe dreams to be another woman on the wall. So to establish myself in research and win all the Nobel Prizes and make my way to the Florey wall. And I hope to see over the coming years that there are more women up on that wall. Because the Florey itself is actually very, very diverse. So it is one of the slight disappointments I have with the building itself, not the people itself, but the little building, that there's only one woman on the wall. So that's my long-term classroom.
That's a great aspiration. Yes. Well, thank you. And time's getting away from us. But I'd like to really thank everybody on the panel today for sharing your experiences. It's fantastic to hear how positive they are. I can certainly echo the sentiments, around research as something to either study or pursue as a career in it of itself. It is quite different from undergrad. There aren't answers at the back of the textbook when you start doing research. And that's really the excitement of the work. You are discovering new things. And sometimes you don't know quite what you're discovering until you've made that mistake and things didn't work or the result wasn't proven, and you're scratching your head thinking, well, okay, well, what could the answer be? And that's really what discovery is about. And working in an institute like the Florey, which is really focused on ultimately impacting in improved health, is really a fantastic place to be learning about research and producing new knowledge. So it just remains for me to remind everybody again that projects on the website, approach your supervisor, potential supervisors, have a chat, and they'll be able to help you, and contact Jackie or Sarah if you need advice on the enrolment process. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming along today. I hope it's been a helpful session for you, and best wishes for whatever it is that you decide to pursue in your future career. Thank you.